This is Viterbi Voices.
Coming to you from the University of Southern California, Viterbi School of Engineering.
We're here to give you the inside scoop on research, classes, student life, and so much more.
All of these shared by students, faculty, alumni, and other members of the USC community.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Viterbi Voices. As usual, I am one of your hosts. My name is Paul Ledesma, Executive Director here of undergraduate admission at the USC Viterbi School of Engineering. I all of a sudden just forgot who I was and what I do. Maybe you'll be better at that, Maya.
I know. I was going to introduce myself. Like, this is me back on the nice professional podcast mic. So hopefully getting some nice audio for you guys. But hello. For those of you who don't know, my name is Maya. I'm a current senior studying industrial and systems engineering here at the Viterbi School of Engineering. I'm your other co-host. It's
good to have you back on the equipment.
I agree. It's good to be back.
It's a big difference as far as I can concern. But I know we still had some good conversations. How's everything been going? I mean, classes have started. You're back. What's up? What's happening? I know. So we were just chatting right before we went on. Like, we haven't seen each other in a while. So what's up?
Yeah. So I think it's been since we've talked last. I ended my internship. So that was the Friday before classes started the following Monday. So that was cool. It was a pretty big, busy weekend moving from Boulder to LA. And then I have an unfurnished apartment. It has since been furnished, but that was a big process that first weekend. Yeah. But I'm loving where I'm living. I was saying being an upperclassman is so cool because all my friends are like a 5-minute walk away. I'm like, this is incredible. This is fun. So all of my friends are living north of campus. That's where I am. It's really cool. I love
without giving away your address. I'm not asking for your address, but where are you at?
I'm on Orchard.
Orchard. Lovely. Yeah. That's where I lived my senior year.
Yeah, maybe we're in the same house.
If you are, I feel bad for you. I did not have a great plan.
Yeah, well, it looks like it's been renovated relatively recently. So
I would hope that most of the places are renovated, but that's a cool street. It's a cool street. It's mostly just like seniors basically and like some grad students, and it's just like it's a different vibe, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, which I'm really enjoying. So yeah, that's that. Classes are really awesome. I have a lot of really small classes this semester, which I think is very special. So I'm in human computer interface design, and upon like first week's impressions, I'd say that's probably my favorite class. But it has 6 people, including myself, which I think is really unique. It's very cool. Awesome. I do feel a little bad. So normally Viterbi, if it's under a certain amount, they'll cancel the class. But I actually need this class this semester in order to graduate. So they're not allowed to cancel it. So my teacher was like, so lucky you guys, 6 of us in the class.
Yeah, that's great.
So life's been good.
Very cool. Very cool. And it's good to see that you're feeling better. I know you were feeling not so great last week. So it's good to have you on the mend. I think it's just everybody coming back and sharing space and all the excitement of the back to school time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. All the stress of like moving in, seeing everyone, getting back to school, ending the job. I actually still need to turn in my work laptop. But yeah,
that's a good idea. Well, very cool. Well, it's good to have you back. It's good to have you back on the mic, on the legit microphone. And it's good to have you here for this one. And I'm sorry we had to record this one without you as well. But this is a episode about another one of our alumni conversations. This is with a very, very cool guy named Will McGarey. Will is originally from Virginia, northern Fairfax County, Virginia, for those of you that are from there or know that region. And he chose to come out to USC. He studied chemical engineering. He did a lot of theater. He was really big in theater in high school, did theater and a cappella singing in college. Went on to do some really great work, not only with consulting agencies, but went off to get his MBA and worked at some companies that I know you've heard of. And so I don't want to spoil anything here, but I think this is a fantastic episode that I really want you to dive right into. And then Maya and I will catch up on the back end and see you all there for some other follow-up conversation. So let's give it right over to me again and talk with Will McGarey. There he is. How are you?
I'm good.
Overall good?
Yeah, I've had a
Where
really
are
good
you?
summer. Where am I? I'm in my apartment in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
Um, yeah, I got back from this trip a couple days ago. Well, I got back and then I immediately left like a day later to go to a wedding in Vermont. So it's sort of like an extension of the trip. But
You've been on a little summer adventure.
yes, I have. I'm tired. It was very fun, but I truly am in that space of like I need a vacation from my vacation.
From the
So
vacation.
happy to be
Totally.
back. And
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on
yeah,
that.
yeah.
We just a quick story. We had set our entire summer on let's do an end of summer blowout. And so that
Okay.
included that everyone on the podcast has heard this like a million times, but that included the Taylor Swift concert and here in LA on the 8th, and
Nice.
then early morning flight to Maui on August 9th. And August 9th, Maui was a bad day to be on the way to Maui. So
Yeah. Oh
that we
my
were supposed to
gosh.
spend a week in Maui. And long story short, plane was taxiing, turned the plane around, and we got off the plane. It was crazy stuff.
In LA or in
In LA.
Maui?
In
You
LA.
never made it to Maui. Okay.
No, thank
Ooh,
goodness.
wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
That's that's really
we are lucky we didn't fly into that because because 120 people stayed on the plane and kept going because at that moment it's a weird thing of it now, but at that moment people were like, it'll be fine. And we were one of those people
yeah.
until we learned more, like as the door closed in the plane and as we started taxiing, and it was crazy. So
Oh wow. So the plane did take off, but you guys made the decision to get off it.
yeah,
Wow. Wow.
yeah, crazy.
Ooh. Well, I'm glad you're okay. Glad you made that decision.
Yeah, we
That's
are lucky.
intense.
We are lucky. But to the point of vacation from vacation, it was a very emotional day. We were on like 4 hours of sleep from the Taylor Swift concert the night before, and then we're like,
Yeah.
what do we do? We ended up rebooking, spending a couple days in Palm Springs just to get some sun and pool time in, and then school started.
Yeah.
Now we're back and running. But should I address your mustache differently? Like, does it have a separate name from Will? Because I'm telling you, it is a powerful, strong. I'm loving the stash, man.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a new addition. It's been a bit of a summer stash. Yeah. No, it's just Will's mustache, you know. I don't know how much longer it's gonna last. I think it may have run its course. I don't think it's like, some people have been commenting like, is this your new persona? And I'm like, I don't think so, but I never really had a beard growing up or in college. And then
Yeah.
sometime in my 20s, I was like, let's see what it looked like if I grew a beard. So then I started experimenting with like beard in the winter, shaved in the summer. And, it's fun to kind of like change things up a little bit. And for some reason this summer, I decided to go full mustache. So
I'm with
here we
you.
are.
I'm with you. To me, it's a lazy thing. It's a matter of like how much work can I cut back on throughout the given week. So I'm with you on that
Yeah.
one. And someone asked me when I had a beard in the summertime, is it hotter? I'm like, I don't really know. And then I remember being in like a museum where they were doing like, it was like a science museum, and they were like doing they had like a thermal camera.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that the beer section was always colder than everywhere else.
Huh.
Which was, I don't know if that's just because the hair was like blocking everything, but I'm like, I'm curious if it actually does keep you cooler.
Yeah. I don't know about that.
I
That's
don't know.
interesting.
I don't know. Just
Need
a
to think
thought.
about the thermodynamics of that.
Get into it.
Speaking of engineering, see what I did there?
Nice segue. So I don't remember, as I was going into this conversation, I don't remember the last time we saw each other, but I graduated in 2013. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow, 2013. And to catch everybody up,
I have my 10 year this November. So
whoa, are you coming to the
really
reunion? Are you coming to homecoming?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll be
that's
there.
very cool. I just saw that unrelated, or I guess related, but I just saw that it's the 100th homecoming of USC. And so they're inviting every single class. It's going to be huge.
Yeah. I feel less special now, but
no, it'll be great.
It's going to be a big blowout.
The reunions themselves are like their own separate event. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
When is that? What game is that?
It's November, first weekend in November, I think, like 2nd through the 4th, I think.
Oh, interesting. Oh, daylight savings ends too. So that what do you get? You fall
Extra
back.
hour, right?
You get an extra hour of
There you
partying.
go.
Way to go.
Easy.
Very cool. All right, so let's remind everybody. Let's introduce everybody to you. If I remember correctly, you're from Virginia. Is that correct?
Yep.
Did you go
Northern
to TJ?
Virginia. I went to TJ. Yep. Good memory.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So you went to TJ from Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, and you went to USC and you studied chemical engineering, right?
Yes, chemical engineering with an environmental emphasis and a minor in theater.
Great. Let's start there. Many would say chemical engineering with environmental emphasis and a minor in theater. None of these things go together. So help, and you and I know they do, but help people understand, how did you get to that point and how do they go together for you?
Yeah. Well, I guess going like way back, into my early days, I was always super into theater. It was kind of my main like extracurricular activity. Always really enjoyed performing, loved singing, did the whole thing. And so I would say at USC, it was less about studying theater and more like wanting to do and participate and be involved with theater. But then sometime around, I guess I was like a junior in high school, I was figuring out like, what schools do I want to apply to? What majors would I want to do at those schools? And I'd always really loved math. And I was at TJ, which is a science and tech like focused high school.
And for everyone listening, this is Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia.
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson High School. It's a science and tech high school, which just means like, as part of the core curriculum, there's like a couple of additional technology requirements, science requirements. And then obviously like there's a lot of, great teachers specifically for those programs and labs and things like that. But it's, for people who are generally interested in science and tech or potentially engineering. So eventually I was kind of having some conversations. My older brother, he studied mechanical engineering, and I was chatting with him and he was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I really like math and, I'm pretty good at science. I don't know, like maybe, so I was kind of like, maybe I'll study chemistry because I really liked chemistry. And he was like, well, engineering is a good kind of mix of all of those things. Yeah. And the thing that really got me was he was like, and you don't have to write any essays. And I was like, that sounds great. I love math and I don't really like writing essays. So really it was the essays thing that got me in there. A little bit of like, foresight to like the practicality of it. Like I sort of knew, I didn't have a fully formed idea of like what specific jobs I might do, but I had a feeling that like an engineering degree might be more broadly applicable than say like a chemistry degree, where you might do some lab research, you might do some drug development, but it didn't quite have like the broad reaching potential maybe. Mm-hmm. Although I learned this, I would say, as I went through. So maybe I got a little bit lucky. But yeah, decided to go for chemical engineering. And then at some point when I got to USC, I started to do some theater extracurricularly. I was like in an a cappella group and eventually I just decided like I wanted a formal minor. I ended up applying for the Renaissance Scholars program, which is a program if you're combining like two degrees, double major, major minor that are quite distinct from each other, you can sort of apply for this distinction. And so I learned about that and I was like, well, that would be cool. And to get that, I would need to have the official thing. And I was already a class or two away from the theater minor. So I was just like, I'm going to go for it. I would love to have that sort of as like a, and I was also kind of proud of it. I was like, I'm an engineer and I do this other thing. And I wanted a little bit of like a stamp to show what that meant for me. But yeah, those things have always been, two, as you say, they're differing things, but for me, they've always been like, two pretty strong passions of mine, and outlets that I've enjoyed pursuing.
That's awesome. When you were in high school, theater was a main production for you. I'm always fascinated by this. What were the productions you were involved in high school? Do you remember and your roles?
Oh yeah, there were a ton of them, but I'll give you the highlights. I was in Into the Woods, and I played Cinderella's prince and the wolf, which is a very fun part. The prince is sort of a bit of a jerk, but like a funny, sort of charming, a little sleazy at times. So it's a very fun part to play. And then my senior year, I was Curly in Oklahoma.
Ooh, wow.
So that was definitely
what a role.
Yeah. what else? I was Banquo in Macbeth one year. I played E.K. Hornbeck in Inherit the Wind, which is the play about the Scopes monkey trial, where people are figuring out how they want to deal with like evolution and being taught in schools. So that was cool. And those are probably the highlights. And then we actually had a Shakespeare troupe as well. So I was in a couple of Shakespeare shows on top of Macbeth. And it ended up being like four or five shows a year. Some of them were smaller, like some of them were like one act plays and things like that. But yeah, it kept me pretty busy for sure.
Absolutely.
It was like my main thing. So
I think that there are a lot of students that are involved in the arts in various ways. That could be music, that could be theater, that could be the fine arts, digital arts, whatever. And going through high school where everybody is constantly kind of, whether it's perceived or actual, adults in their life kind of putting a microscope on them saying, what is your path in life? You need to tell me what your passions are. And someone who's, skilled academically, doing well in school, but passionate about the arts, and in your case, passionate about theater. Can you reflect on that feeling of being torn? Because you kind of talked about it real quickly in that you were talking to your brother about what should I do, because it sounds like there's this idea of identity crisis that a high school student goes through. And I think that there's a lot of our students that go through that, and you're on the other side of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think about because unfortunately, I think I don't know that I ever really, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but this is where I'm going to go with it. I don't know if I ever really considered like pursuing theater either academically, like as a major, or professionally. And I think, unfortunately, that was because I just grew up in this environment and this era of like,
that's just for fun.
Academics being so. What was that?
That's just for fun. You just do it for fun. It's for fun. Types of
it was sort of like academics were the most important thing, and like theater is not a practical thing to do. Again, these are like voices I sort of heard.
Was that family? Was that family or is that school? Because TJ's
no. It was a little bit TJ, I would say. Like there's definitely a focus on like I would say like traditional academic pursuits, like
Got it.
That also being like math and science. And so I don't know why I think I was also just a pretty practical kid, and I was sort of like, and this may sound a little depressing, but I was sort of like, it's really hard to make it as an actor. Like the chances are quite low. I don't know if I want to like devote my life to this for this thing that could happen, but is probably pretty rare, where like I'd like to focus on a career where I could have a little bit more of a comfortable life and feel more secure about money and be able to travel as much as I wanted. Like there were definitely some I was a very practical kid. Like I was not a dreamer in any way. And so like my parents weren't telling me that, but I was sort of realizing this, and I was kind of like, okay, like theater is a fun thing to do. But interestingly enough, I like sort of, as all things happen when you get older, like just within the past year, I'm having a little bit of a reckoning with this. Not that I think I made the wrong decision, but for the first time, just this past May, I was in a musical in Brooklyn. It had been like 10 years since my last production was at USC. I was in Chicago, my senior year, Chicago the Musical, my senior year at USC 10 years ago. And something just like, I don't know what happened in the past year. I think I was just like post-pandemic, a couple of different jobs that maybe made me feel a little burned out. I was like, I need something else. And I just sort of woke up and I was like, oh my God, I haven't done theater in like 10 years. This was a huge part of my life. Like I got to figure out if there's a way to get back into this. And so did a little bit of research, found this community theater group nearby where I lived in Brooklyn, and auditioned and was in a show. And so that was a wonderful experience. And I'm now honestly a little bit like, maybe I'll do this a little bit. Maybe I do a little bit of business, a little bit of theater. Like who's to say it can't be done? I don't know. It's all it's in the works, and I'm thinking through this, but it's all kind of coming full circle.
I mean, I think that's the thread of your education in general, is who's to say it all can't be done. I mean, I think that's a really cool like thing to write down on a Post-it note and put on your desk and put it on your mirror. Who's to say it all can't be done? Because what sounds like, just to kind of put a mirror back up to you, is like this idea of practicality told your own brain to kind of shut things down. And it was always there. And I think that's what's fascinating about like our students, like a lot of our listeners, they come through thinking that they're coming to a fork in the road and they have to choose. And your quote, "Who's to say it all can't be done," is something that we want to remind people of all time, and that we can get into practicality of marketability of an arts degree versus an engineering degree. And that's not to say that the arts education is not valuable, but there is a difference, right? But I think it's important to remind people that thing that sparks, that thing that drives, that thing that kind of keeps you going in these little elements, is important to recognize and to not eschew, not to just like push off to the side. And I think that's what's really really cool about you. And even looking at some of the stuff that you've done, you found outlets, right? And so high school theater programs are one thing. And I think that's the hard part, is you go through a high school, there is the high school theater program, and people kind of know that structure is kind of like athletics, right? Like there's rehearsals, there's auditions, there's performances, there's a season to it, and you get into college and it's not so much that way, and there's kind of various levels of depth, rigor, commitment that people can get involved in. And then what I think was really cool about you, and you mentioned this as well, but I want to talk about it, is you found different outlets, and one of those things was a cappella. Like the idea of performing, I think, is an important aspect. And can you talk about, because that was not something you did in high school, correct?
No, it was the first. I'd always done like theater. I'd never really done much choir or anything like pure singing.
Yeah.
But I loved singing, and I always loved it in the context of musical theater. But you get to college, I feel like the a cappella group is very
totally a college thing.
It's very classic college, right? I mean, I think the first Pitch Perfect movie came out maybe at the end of my college experience, or right after.
Somewhere around there. Yeah.
That sort of like maybe blew it up. But even before that, I feel like it's a cappella group is a very classic college thing. And it's a cool mix between, like, choir to me always felt a little too traditional. Like, I love performing, and it's a little bit like purely about what's coming out of your voice. Musical theater is like the other extreme of that. And a cappella is sort of in the middle. It's like, it is about performing, but it's not quite about like characterization as much as, you're sort of performing like you would in a band or something like that. But I kind of just knew that would be right for me. I knew I wanted like some sort of outlet for that was consistent, because, shows come and go. And like you said, it's not as structured. I didn't always have time necessarily or the right schedule to do some of the shows because like of the timing of the rehearsals, but a cappella was like pretty consistent. And I also knew it'd be like a really cool social outlet, at a big school. It's kind of helps you like find this group that's a little bit smaller that you're kind of with throughout your 4 years. And so kind of was a no-brainer for me to audition. I auditioned fall semester of my freshman year and got admitted to the USC Troy Tones, which was also definitely a good fit for my personality, because they definitely it was a good mix of like, we were good, but we didn't take ourselves too seriously. We like wore costumes to all our concerts. We sort of were the like group that was a little bit like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, it's college a cappella. Like, let's have fun with this. Right. Yeah. Like, this is about, we're in college.
We don't take ourselves too seriously.
Like, let's enjoy this. And we definitely did. It was a great experience.
That's awesome. I think I skipped this question, but what made you come to USC, especially coming all the way from Virginia? I think that even in your family, you went far west, right? Yeah. Your family's all East Coast.
Yeah. It was very sort of like all things can be in these situations, very sort of random and serendipitous. Like I was applying to all East Coast schools. I actually think I remember I had sat down with my advisor, my high school advisor, and I was like, I am pretty sure I'm going to apply early to Cornell. Like, I visited Cornell. I liked it. We had a chat. But like the next weekend I had planned this trip to go out to USC because I had a couple of friends So not a lot of kids from my high school go to USC, but there's kind of an interesting pipeline, or there was, of like theater and film, and like a couple film students, a couple theater students, music, because that's like such a big draw to USC. But like truly not a lot of people in Virginia even knew much about USC.
Right.
But they were 2 years older than me. It was like 2 friends who were in the class of 2011, and they were at USC, and I had done theater with them, and I don't even know if they were like, come out and visit because you might like this as a school. I think we were just like, come out and see us. Like, we miss you. Like, let's hang out. Right.
Yeah.
So I went out for the weekend. I mean, I clearly had to have pitched it to my parents who paid for the flight to be like, I'm looking at USC. Like, so I did take a tour and I did the whole thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, by the end of the weekend, I was like, I remember like taking the flight back, and you know that feeling when you're like, I've made a decision about Cornell, but I'm like, there's something in the back of my head that's nagging me, and I'm almost a little bit sad because I'm like, oh, I've already made that decision. Like, it really sucks that I like USC this much. And then you sort of like come to the realization that you're like, well, just because I made, air quotes, made that decision, it's not down on paper. I haven't applied. Like, I can, I'm my own person. I can do whatever I want. I can decide, because I have more information now, that decision isn't the right for me. But it sort of like took a little bit of processing to get there. And I remember being so sad on the flight home, being like, oh man, I really want to go to USC, but like, I don't know how that could happen. And then, the next couple of weeks, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to apply early to Cornell because I need more information. And I just started gathering all that information. Yeah. And honestly, at that point, I didn't even know a ton about the programs at USC, other than I knew they had a great theater program. I did some research on the engineering program. Oh, this is actually a funny piece of information. There must have been something about timing, because now that I'm thinking about it, USC was actually the only school that I applied to for engineering. I'm pretty sure for all the other schools, I applied to like the arts and sciences. So it must have been later in the process that I decided on engineering, and then, kind of mixed the engineering and theater thing. And then I found out about the merit scholarship as well. So it just sort of all kind of came together. And then, I really decided, I was like, this is really the place I want to go. And I like not put all my eggs in that basket, but I like definitely put a lot of effort into like meeting people, meeting the admissions people. Like I did a local interview, which I don't think was required, but I was just like, I want them to know who I am. Like I got to put my all into this. And yeah, so it was sort of I went from not knowing nothing to being like, this is the place I want to go. It accelerated very quickly. But I'm glad it did. It definitely worked out for me.
So a couple of things just to clarify for our listening audience now. Applying early admission to Cornell was a kind of I'm committing, right? It was a binding committing process. And we don't do that. We have never done that. We don't do that. We do something called early action now, which is not early admission. This is just more for the audience. Will, sorry.
Yeah.
And that is a non-binding, non-restrictive process, just an earlier submission date, but not locking you in. And the reason I bring that up is because people ask me, why don't we do early admission? And you just described the reason why. Let's say you're dead set on USC. You haven't met the school that you're going to fall in love with yet. We don't know that. And even the idea of discovering engineering along the way, I've told people many times, like, you immerse yourself in things, you experience things sometimes as late as your senior year that will say like, hey, maybe engineering is something you should look at. And that happens with colleges too. And so in your case, you just described the two reasons why. This is a process that does take time. It does take your entire senior year, but someone like you that's a planner will sit back and be like, no, I should probably have this figured out ahead of time, which is where that remorse came from, right? Which is like, no, I've already solved this problem. Why am I reopening? It's like, no, you weren't supposed to. It's a little too early, a little premature. And also you were discussing back in the day, we used to do admission interviews and we don't do those anymore. But now I'm just curious because I'm just trying to relive the days. Those were, we would send people out to different cities. And in that area, I remember we would do the interviews in the Hilton in Alexandria. Is that where you went? Do you remember?
Or might have been. I think I went to Baltimore. I remember driving into, or somewhere in Maryland. It might not have been all the way
Crystal
in Baltimore.
Springs? Silver Springs?
It could. Yeah, I think that was it.
The mall there in Silver Spring.
I definitely drove. I remember specifically driving through the Beltway, like 495 to get there.
Do you
I'm
remember
pretty sure it was in
do you remember
Maryland.
who interviewed you? I'm putting you on the
Oh,
spot. You don't have to. And now I'm just reliving
I
those
can
days.
picture him. I can picture him because he was the person. I don't remember if he was the rep for like my area. I don't think he was engineering related, but
Okay.
I can picture him. I want Adam. I don't know why that name is popping up. That could be totally wrong. It's
Probably
been
central. Yeah, central
a
person.
very long time,
It's
but
okay.
yeah.
I was just now just like going down memory lane. I'm like, I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
doing those interviews in different cities and trying to figure out like what was happening because those were all like interesting days for us. Like they're stressful days for you guys because you guys think you're going for quote the interview. And so like the
Yeah.
pressure, which I'm so glad we don't do this anymore because like you guys would be freaked out. And then we would be drained entirely by having the same conversation 20 times in one day.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure.
it's just like we're sitting in a room with no windows. Like it's
Yeah.
just like it's horrible for everybody. It was not a
Yeah.
positive experience. So go to USC, great things happen. And then your timeline, you start doing lots of stuff. And I don't have all the details, but I know you go to work. I know you get really involved in out for undergrad. And then you also go and get your MBA at Dartmouth. And I don't want to, it doesn't have to be linear, but I'm kind of curious, post USC, what happens?
Yeah. So post USC, I sort of made a beeline for New York City. I had this dream of living in New York for my entire life.
Yeah.
You know, I liked LA, but I would not a California boy. I just sort of knew that. And I was I gotta live in the Big Apple. That's where the theater is. Again, not for me to do theater, but I was like, I
Just be
love
part of it. Yeah.
Broadway. And it just like I had a lot of friends in the East Coast who were moving there. It kind of made sense. So, and I ended up, you know, as all things do, like sort of figuring everything out last minute. Kind of realized like around my end of my junior year, beginning of senior year, I was like, I don't actually think I've loved getting an engineering education. I love the like problem solving. I've loved like doing the math and science just from an academic perspective. But I was like, I don't really think that I want to be an engineer in like the traditional sense of like doing the work that an engineer does, which again can be a million different things. But yeah, I don't know. I sort of started to research like other types of jobs that would hire engineers for non-engineering roles. And actually, you mentioned out for undergrad, which we can talk more about. But the way I sort of found out about a lot of these roles was through this conference that I went to called the Out for Undergrad Business Conference, which was in New York City. And it was a conference basically for like finance, consulting, investing, that type of thing. It's now expanded into a ton more different careers, but that at the time was sort of like the flagship conference. And I sort of just went because I was like, I didn't know that much about it. I forget how I even found out about it, but it was, it's a conference for LGBTQ undergrads who are interested in going into these careers, kind of as like let's give you an understanding of what these careers are and also just like help you meet other queer people who are in those fields. Like back then, kind of to be like, you can do this. Like, and there were different industries within the sort of finance and consulting umbrella, had different, it was easier or not easy to be like an out queer person in those industries. I think banking as like one of the most traditional industries was sort of like, unfortunately, one of the last ones to come around to like diversity and inclusion and really just like creating an environment where people felt comfortable being out. And so there were a lot of those, like a lot of the conference was just us like sitting in a room, like chatting with people, 10, 15 years our senior to hear their experience. That was like, mostly positive, but also a little bit real about that. But anyway,
right.
I'm digressing. That's how I sort of found out about consulting. I ended up really at the last minute, like applying to a bunch of consulting firms, had no idea what a case interview was. I remember I had an interview with Bain and I literally opened up Case in Point, which is like a book to teaching you how to do a case interview, like 2 days before the interview. Naturally, the interview went terribly and I did not get a second round, but that's okay. I ended up getting an interview with PwC that went well and landed at PwC in New York. So it all sort of worked out. But yeah, then was at PwC for a couple of years. I kind of kind of bopped around doing a few different things. Started in their tech consulting group, and then randomly I kind of got pulled into a project because they needed a head, and it was with the forensics group that does sort of like forensic investigations, accounting, like anti-bribery, anti-corruption work. And I just had a great manager that I was working with who I like really respected. And I ended up asking to get extended on the project, and he really liked me. And eventually after like 4 or 5 months, I was like, maybe I should just join this group. Like I met all these people. I really like them. Like I'm finding the work interesting. So I ended up kind of doing like an internal transfer into the forensics group. And did that for about another year. Should I just keep going through?
I love it. Yeah, I'm not stopping you because I'm like, yeah, awesome. This is great. I mean, at some point, I want to.
So you're gonna have to stop me if you want me to.
Well, actually, so if we're gonna leave PwC, let's stop here because let's go back to Out for Undergrad because I think it's important to talk about that and also how you found out about this group and the conference itself, not the group, but the conference itself. And I know that you did extensive work with them as well and kind of expanded its reach. But the idea of identity and building community around identity and enhancing inclusive environments and something that, for lack of a better way of explaining it, is far more, I don't want to call it easy. It's not easy, but it's far more common in colleges and universities than it is in the professional world.
Yeah.
And I think you were, as you mentioned, you were at that precipice of this new dawn of like, well, let's just keep pushing it into the professional world. If I don't want to speak on your behalf, but that's kind of what you found.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I went to Out for Undergrad, I don't know that I thought much about because I was out, I came out like end of high school and was fully out in college, but I hadn't really done much thinking about what would it be like to be out professionally. And I think this conference definitely and this, the organization more broadly, because after the conference and I moved back to New York, I started volunteering with them and really got to know the inner workings of the organization, made a ton of friends, ended up launching a conference of my own, which I'll chat about. But I just started having these conversations and kind of just came to the realization that the only way to be, for me at least, to be fully happy, a fully realized person, a person who can do my best work, a person that feels, an employee that feels like I am putting my best foot forward and growing in the ways that I need to grow and succeeding at my job in the ways that I wanted to, because I'm a very I've always been very academic and ambitious and I wanted to do well. But to do those things, I couldn't really do them if I wasn't out, if I wasn't, my most authentic self. Because when you're not out, you're constantly thinking about, I always give this example of what did you do this weekend? If you have to, if you can't say I went to out to a gay bar, or I went out with my boyfriend, or, whatever it is, if you're having to sort of qualify things or
edit
dance
things
around, edit things out, it's really stressful. It's very, and so, I mean, luckily for me, I found this group and kind of came into my, career being okay, I have to be out because it's the right thing to do for me. And it might be hard, but I need to really push myself to do that. And it was hard. There were definitely situations where I didn't reveal that I was gay, not because I was scared, but because it was just awkward. It was someone would ask a question do you have a girlfriend? And you're oh, wow, how do I answer this without lying and without also putting,
saying no doesn't
for me
answer
to
the
tell
question.
you that I'm gay also in this moment feels so weird. It just is, you're just caught with this frog in your throat, and you're wait, I'm out. Why am I not saying this? But yet I'm, so there's always a couple of those situations. On the whole, it was great and easy. And I got to the point where I would my strategy is just to bring it up in any way that I can early, just because I'm I want people to know this about me. I don't want it to come up awkwardly by some sort of question like this. And I also feel as I've grown older and done this enough times, one, there have been so many times where me coming out in these settings has caused someone else to come out to me, or like there's been some additional effect that I wasn't aware of. And then secondarily, like people do see that as an act of vulnerability. And I think that vulnerability like sort of creates more intimacy, and people are like more willing to be vulnerable with you. You're building better relationships. Like it just does make things better. And I've had to sort of convince myself of that, but then I've seen it in action enough times to be like, oh, this is true. This is definitely true. So yeah, so I joined with Out for Undergrad and worked with them for a while as like a volunteer while I was at PwC. PwC was a sponsor, so I would go as a PwC rep to kind of like recruit students, and then I kind of got involved. I worked kind of in like digital marketing for Out for Undergrad for a while, and then about a year after that, they announced that they were launching an engineering conference and a marketing conference. Marketing being for like kind of CPG type work. And I remember I had the classic thing of like, well, I've only been involved with this for a year. I'd love to be involved with the engineering conference, but like, you know, I only as like a minion or whatever. Like, yeah. And then eventually the executive director sat down and he was like, I think you should lead it. Like you are the person to lead it. And I was like, who, me? No, like I couldn't do that. I have never launched I'm 20, was like 23, 24 at that point. I was like, I've never launched an entire, conference that needs to generate like $100,000+ in sponsorships. Like I was just like totally outside the realm of my possibility. But I think what I realized with all things is like, I was super passionate about it. Like this organization had brought me so much. And I was like, engineering is a whole other area that I'm sure I didn't know necessarily, but I was like, I'm sure there's a need here. And I'm passionate about this. I have the organizational skills, plus I was an engineer, so I know what this is like. Like I'm can 100% put myself in the shoes of these students. So just sort of, again, one of those leaps of faith. And I was like, I don't know how this is going to go, but let's do it. And it went very well. So I ran that conference for 2 years and ended up sort of handing it off to one of the folks on my team for the third year. And I've gone back a few times to visit and like to attend the conference and kind of see people and volunteer. So yeah, it was a really wonderful period of my life. It taught me a lot. And I have a ton of friends as well, like just socially in New York and across the country. I met a ton of great people who were really passionate about this.
It's phenomenal stuff. It's very, very cool. I am curious. You mentioned proactively talking about being out, talking about being gay without being asked about it. You said you have ways in which you kind of throw it out there. I'm curious, do you have a favorite way where you kind of drop the breadcrumb with someone where you're like, I need you to know, or then their reactions? I'm assuming there's great stories here.
The reactions are always pretty mild because I will say I usually do it in the context of something real. I'm not saying, like it'll usually be about like something that happened that weekend or like a pride parade. I mean, pride parade sounds like so like absurdly generic. It's not like there's a pride parade every weekend, but I'm trying to think of, honestly, the easiest one is when I've been in relationships, I just mention my boyfriend. That is just like, saying the word boyfriend. It'd be wonderful to always be in a relationship if just for the fact that I could come out like so easily. It's like the easy, it's super easy. But the times when I haven't been in relationships, in New York, like I'll, just if we're chatting about like an area of town, I'll be like, oh, I really love that bar, like that bar that everyone knows is a gay bar. Got it. Kind of like got it. Things like that. Sometimes things will come up with like, oh, I'll mention like something about an ex-boyfriend because of it's always contextual. I am definitely not taking it out of thin air, because I do think that again, authenticity, like people know when something is up and it's weird. And like, it's not so important to me that I have to bring it up out of nowhere. But in times when previously I might have like, oh, I have a thought about something I want to say. Oh, that's going to out me. Where I might have been like, well, I don't need to say it. Like, it's not critical to the conversation. It's not like somebody's asking me if I have a girlfriend and I need a response. It's like, I'm just in a conversation and I thought about that. Yeah. And maybe when I was 22, I might have been like, I don't need to say that. Now I'm like, I'm saying it. Like, even if it's every time it's a little scary, like I'm just putting it out there because that's who I am. And like, I've just trusted that this has worked out in the past and it'll continue work out in my favor in the future.
It's fascinating. So I to by no means to equate experiences, because they're not equal or anywhere near. I'm in an industry where I'm probably one of the only straight guys in any professional setting I'm in. If I'm in a conference, it's 90% women and 8% gay men and me. And that's kind of it. And it's great. But what's funny is I find myself doing the exact same thing of the opposite of like, and it's very unconscious, and I didn't realize it till you started saying it, is that like I commonly will like bring up my wife without being asked in certain ways, and I'm not at all worried about it. I'm not concerned, and there's no problem at all. And it's not a problem if it goes the other direction either, but it's just really funny to me that like I do find myself doing the exact same thing. And that's interesting to me to understand. That could be geography, that could be the city, New York, that could be the industry, the profession, all these, because what you started to describe is like, okay, well, what's the situation? What's the environment that I'm in? And that's to think that you're constantly doing that calculus, or what someone would refer to as code switching, like to figure out like where you're going to go. There's good news and bad news to it. It still exists. The good news is that it's such, even in our conversation, in the leap of 10 years, this is a huge progression of inclusivity and the ideas of people being their true authentic selves and comfortable in being so, and corporate culture, social culture, etc. Not blinking an eye at these things, and no one having to worry about it, which I think is where we need to go. And unfortunately, not everyone is. I have other horror stories I'll tell with you privately that I've encountered recently.
I'm sure.
Oh man, so much stuff that we've done at the school, and not people associated with the school, but that I've gotten emails about where I'm like, what? So anyway, so professionally, and this is really interesting because we've had a number of alums, and we've had this conversation with a number of VSA alums, that a lot of VSAs go into consulting. There's a whole culture there of like going into consulting. So I'm interested to get your take. Why do so many VSAs go into consulting? And
that's a good question.
What is it, right? So like everybody has their take on what consulting is. And you started the conversation saying, I don't want to go into true engineering, but to paraphrase, you wanted to be able to go into an industry that uses your engineering skill set. And there's an overlap on VSAs and consulting. And it's a previous episode just talked about this with Lissa. I think Lissa. Had the same exact conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to use like stereotypes, but the first thing that comes to mind is like, a lot of people end up being VSAs, really enjoy putting themselves out there, really enjoy public speaking, are like very sort of people focused. And I think that's a lot of the skill set that is required in consulting. And so I think there's like an appeal to, and maybe for me as well, like it wasn't necessarily that I was interested in consulting as much as when I looked at like doing an engineering role, I truly was like, I don't think it's going to be social enough for me. I'm like a huge extrovert. Lab work, I'd done it a bunch. I did it all throughout high school because it's like, prestigious, and it would look good on it in a resume. That's not the only reason I did it, but it was sort of like, it took me a while to be like, oh, this is not for me. Like, even though it's like, I should, like it's all these shoulds, like, oh, I should really want to do lab work because it's really cool work. I was like, yeah, but it doesn't get me going. Like, it's not the right combination of what I want to be doing. And so I think there's something there where like client focused work really requires a lot of like thinking on your feet in ways that are not just what's the word? Not just about like the work, or it's not like doing math in your head, but it's like figuring out what are people thinking and how are they feeling about this, and how are they like sort of working a room a little bit in a way to get to the best result for the whole team. And so I think that's a skill set that VSAs have, is kind of,
but not mutually exclusive from the technical skill set too. I think that's the one part I want people to understand too, is that it's the technical skills are all there, and then this is on top of that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that, I don't know, that's my stab at sort of that correlation. Cool. And then in terms of what consulting is, I mean, the cool thing about it is it can be anything. And so many consulting firms have expanded from what was maybe the traditional, strategy consulting. Where's our industry going to be in 5 years, and how do we stay relevant? Like,
a lot of people think HR. A lot of people have like an HR core.
Oh yeah.
Like they think it's like a consulting to come in to streamline efficiencies to hire
people.
HR,
like redundancies and things like that. Yeah. There's definitely a perception about that. And I mean, so I started in tech consulting at PwC. So I was doing like systems, backend, like systems implementations, like SAP and Oracle stuff. Then I did forensic consulting, which was like accounting investigations, basically like catching people who had committed fraud at companies. And, it's like a totally different, very cool, little bit niche thing. Then cut forward to, we're skipping a couple steps in my, in my time, but post MBA, I went to McKinsey, and then I did like more traditional strategy work, although it ran the gamut from like, how do we enter this new market to like down to very technical, like we want to understand how to translate our financial statements into true economic statements of like cash flow value. And so I built this huge model that kind of like automated that. So some of it can be very technical, down to just like pure, what should our strategy be for the next 3 years type of work. And so, what we're seeing now with a lot of these consulting firms is a lot of them are getting more and more specialized, and they're doing that by like acquiring other niche firms. So like when I was at McKinsey, we had acquired Quantum Black, which has like, huge data analytics work. And that now it's like a whole separate arm of McKinsey that like only does that. And it's grown a ton within there. We had a whole, I worked on a climate risk project where I was working with like this geospatial analytics, hub of McKinsey that I didn't even know existed, but, they basically like do geospatial mapping to figure out like which areas are going to be at most highest risk for which climate disasters. And, so it's getting, the needs of the world are clearly getting more and more, I don't want to say technical, more and more specialized, which a lot of times includes technical needs. And so because of that, consulting firms realize that they can't just hire, like the really smart history major from, who got a 4.0, because, the traditional consulting thing is like, you put smart people in a room who have critical problem solving skills. That's for me where the engineering came in. It's like engineering taught me, math and analytics, but more than that, it taught me how to think critically and solve problems that maybe weren't quite obvious, like what the problem even is. And so I think that's the main skill set in consulting is it's problem solving, it's idea generation, it's like critical thinking and analysis, all rolled into one. But it can also be a million other things because the needs of companies who are hiring consultants are becoming a lot more specialized.
That's cool. Now, you, similarly to other consultants, have taken on some other roles at companies. Sometimes it's because you were consulting for that company and then they pulled you over. I don't know if that's the case, but you had two different food companies, which I think is fascinating for people to understand. HelloFresh and Mosaic Foods, right?
Yes.
And people are familiar, I think, with HelloFresh, this, mail order, get your things like that. And Mosaic, I think, is very similar, right?
Yeah, it's very similar. It's like food in a box, but it's all prepared meals. So they're actually frozen, and you heat up in the microwave or in the oven. So you're skipping the cooking aspects.
Got it. So HelloFresh was the cooking.
It's even more streamlined. Yeah, exactly.
Got it. And this is a huge thing. There's so many different brands that do these types of meal prep services type things that are out there. I just saw one Wild Fork open up in my neighborhood. It has like a retail space, which I've never heard of. And cool. I'm like, interesting. How did you find your way into these food companies?
Yeah. So HelloFresh was the first one.
Oh, and you were in London? Is that right? You were in London
too?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So HelloFresh was the first one. And I had done like a couple of years at PwC was sort of starting to feel like I wanted, a bit of a change. I was like, I don't think I'm a lifer in consulting. Like this was a great skill set to learn, but I think I want to do something different. Maybe I want to work at a smaller company. Yeah. And so I sort of started to research like some startups, and then actually throughout for undergrad, one of my friends who was on the board had just graduated from business school. And he was like, I have a really good friend from business school who had just joined this company, HelloFresh. Like, you should have a chat with her. So I had a chat with her. And at the time, meal kits were like sort of a thing. People knew about Blue Apron more, I would say. Like Blue Apron was sort of starting to pick up, at least in the New York area. So I'd heard of Blue Apron, never heard of HelloFresh, and had never even tried a meal kit. But ended up really liking the HelloFresh folks. I actually applied to Blue Apron, and funnily enough, the guy that I ended up working for at Mosaic was the same one that I interviewed for at Blue Apron like 6 years before. So everything comes full circle, and the food industry is very small. But yeah, ended up at HelloFresh, kind of for a couple of reasons. One was they had an international presence, which was interesting to me. And the job offer, or the job description, said like potential opportunities for secondment in London, Amsterdam, Berlin. And I was like, I don't know if that's what I want, but that sounds interesting enough that I'd rather have like the opportunity for that than say not.
Yeah.
And they were just like a little bit smaller, a little bit scrappier than the established name. And I was like, I like an underdog. Like, I'm like, I think these people know what they're doing, and I want to see where this goes. Like, and so sort of, yeah, just jumped in. I joined in like a special, we called it the special operations team, special ops. It was kind of like a special projects for operations doing, HelloFresh at that point was still fairly small. So it was like classic startup, like
doing everything.
Every day there's something new fires popping up that you got to put out. And so it was very like, we were kind of tackling the thing that like the line function folks, the folks who were doing like procurement or culinary every day really didn't have time or brain power to like devote energy towards. So I ended up doing a bunch of different stuff. I worked on packaging for a while. I ended up taking over and managing the culinary team for a couple of months, basically because we just needed someone to do it. Like that person had moved on to a different role. So that was a challenge. I had like I was 24 at this point and had like a couple of very seasoned chefs reporting to me. And again, was sort of in that situation. I was like, how did I get here? I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, please no one find out. But it worked. It was like, I didn't step on their toes from like a creative perspective. I just sort of came in with a little bit of like a consultant mindset to be like, how can we apply a little more structure to this process, a little more data, like make decisions with some data and kind of like push them a little bit in this way or that way. And so we actually ended up getting along quite well. And then, then I joined like what we called like a customer strategy team, where we were doing strategy work, figuring out what our customers want in our product, continued to work very closely with culinary. And then at some point they announced that they wanted to send someone to London, because at that point, the US portion of the business was growing quite a bit. And they wanted presence over in Europe to kind of help like the global team understand a little bit more about the US customer. It was sort of a bit of like the tech team was based in Berlin. They wanted somebody to be able to like get a little more US influence over there, because it was very standardized across all of the different countries. And so at that point, I had kind of just like, I'd been there a while. I'd already told my boss that I was interested in living abroad, and positioned myself as like the customer guy, because I'd been doing that for 6 months at HelloFresh, and kind of just raised my hand and was like, I want to go to London. Like, let's do this. So I went to London for 6 months, which was, an incredible experience. I had an amazing time. I was based in London, but traveling to Berlin to talk with the tech folks, and went to Amsterdam a few times, did my own travel as well. And yeah, it was an incredible experience, and piqued my interest for London, because I ended up moving there after business school as well. So I did 6 months at HelloFresh. By that point, I had also applied to business school, got in like near the end of those 6 months, and put in my notice at HelloFresh and took the summer off, traveled a bunch. and then went to Dartmouth. But sort of by the beginning of Dartmouth, I was like, because you kind of have to know what type of internship you want to do pretty quickly. Yeah. I was like, I want to go. I hadn't said I definitely want to go back to London. I was like, I want to live abroad. And I actually ended up applying to jobs in Sydney and London, which I ended up back in London, which I was very happy about. But that could have been an alternate path where I ended up in Sydney as well. And I'm also not saying that isn't a potential option for the future. Always keeping things open.
Lots of things in play. Speaking of Dartmouth and your MBA, as an engineering person, someone who went through that whole undergrad, but also with these other diverse experiences, both in the classroom and out of it, how would you describe an MBA education?
Ooh, very different from engineering.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a very simply stated question that I know is incredibly complex, which is why I'm asking it. Even just the look on your face is like, how do I do that?
Take this, my face, my mouth being open wide as the screenshot teaser for this podcast. Totally. It is. I mean, okay, so there's different parts of the MBA education. There's the traditional like academic part, which I would say in a lot of ways can be very similar to engineering classes. I'd say like half the classes are probably pretty similar. You're doing some sort of like math, whether it's, if you're not doing like, very intense math, but you're doing accounting, or we had a stats class, or, capital markets, and there's like math and analytics involved. Yeah. And then the other half of the classes are a lot more sort of, I don't know what the word is. I don't want to say humanities because it's not really the right word. Non-mathematical. Either, you're doing like ethics courses or communications courses or, courses about like specific
organizational behavior,
courses about like, specific industries, or like we had one course that I loved called the CEO experience, which was basically, so most MBA programs have some version of like a case basis in the curriculum. So rather than, doing, problem sets, you're studying cases, which are, like 20-page long case studies into a specific thing, that happened at a company or with a government or whatever. And it's meant to kind of illustrate like an example of what happened, how they dealt with it, and where the sort of pitfalls, like why they were really successful or why they failed, as a way of kind of helping you think through these different business scenarios. So this one course I took called the CEO experience was basically just like case studies on a bunch of different companies, kind of focused around like their CEO or their main, leader or whatever. So that was just very, it's just very experiential. You're like learning through the experience of watching how something happened in the past. So that the education is maybe split in half in terms of what you would like. Half of the courses are more engineering, half are kind of something else. But then there's also like the education, which is more broad than that, which is just like the experience as a whole, which is a lot about, meeting people, connecting with them. Like, I don't want to say the word networking, I find like a little bit annoying sometimes because it can sound so like tactical. Yeah. For me, it was just like making friends with people who also will be in careers that will be interesting, potentially beneficial to me in the future. Like, and I'll give an example. I got my job at Mosaic because a friend of mine who worked for a consumer venture capital firm, I literally was just like chatting with her, being like, I want to work for another food startup. Like, what are the hot companies? Like, who do you know about? You work in VC, you must know. She kind of rattled off a bunch, and she was like, yeah, this company Mosaic, I met them at a conference a couple of years ago. Like the founders were really nice. I think they have a really cool product. Like, she couldn't even introduce me. She was like, I don't know these guys, but I know about them. Yeah. And like, you should check them out. And I ended up like DMing the CEO on LinkedIn being like, hey, I worked at McKinsey and HelloFresh. I'd love to work for you. Should we chat? And he was like, yes, let's chat. It was like the perfect timing.
That's amazing.
These startups, they always struggle with recruiting. And he was like, that was one of the best messages I ever got because I had to do no work to get you there. And we we chatted and hit it off. So, it's these connections that, that was just like a friend of mine that I traveled, we went on trips together. We traveled to New Zealand together, but I knew she knew about, consumer companies. And so I just reached out to her. And so that's sort of like the broader, I don't know if it's learning, but the benefit of the MBA is just like learning from people's experiences, learning empathy from people's super diverse experiences, which, that doesn't happen in the classroom. That happens, throughout the entire experience, whether it's socially or trips you take, or just like, just being in the same environment as these people for a couple of years. And Tuck, I was also lucky, Tuck, as the business school at Dartmouth was quite small. We had 270 people in our class, which is small for an MBA program. So you really leave like knowing all your classmates in a really intimate way, which was for me really huge, especially coming from USC, which was huge, huge school, which was wonderful in a lot of ways. But I was also like, I'm kind of like, I want every type of experience. I was like, I went to one of the biggest schools. I'm going to one of the smallest schools. I went in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire. Like, I want to know what that's like.
Well, I think the one thing you should know, and I'm having flashbacks to meetings and discussions we used to have, over 10 years ago, is that the one thing that I don't know whether you discount yourself at all, but like the idea that you don't mention is the idea that you are reaching out for these challenges. And that's the one thing that's always been really, really clear about you, is that you're going to do stuff. You're going to try things. Sometimes people are going to say, hey, you should do stuff, whether that's the Out for Undergrad conference or anything else, but you're not going to shy away, and you're just going to keep going, and you're not going to be like, I can't do that. I can't do this. It's not really in your vocabulary. So I think that the one thing that I see as the thread of you and a lot of other successful students that go on to do great things is you're willing to try. And I'm going to, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy for me, but I'm going to figure it out. Because I think too often these days, especially whether it's the information age or whether it's a certain way of parenting or whether, I don't know what, but there's a certain thread of, I won't be successful in that, so I won't do it. Like there's a really interesting dynamic of the differentiation of successful people versus unsuccessful people, whether they have the quote same GPA, they were successful through high school. The differentiating factor comes out. It starts in college of, I'll do that. You know what? Let's try. Let's get to the uncomfortable space. Let's push ourselves. Because I was remembering you were describing your handling of seasoned chefs. I like the word seasoned chefs. I think it was a really great way of describing the chefs. And I had a flashback remembering you managed our VKey process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was like, I feel like that was the same conversation of you handling students to write their content and film their videos.
Probably. Yeah.
Like, it's like, I feel like I've had this conversation with you. I'm like, Will, you got to figure it out, man. Like, just, you got to get them to do it. You got to go in there.
We had a lot of long chats in your office about how we were going to get folks to submit content.
But you did it. I mean, it's a really interesting thing. And so I think that's really, really cool. And it's really, really great. And I'm so proud to just be a small little part of your journey, to watch you go from this place and see you continue to challenge yourself and continue to be successful. And more importantly, to share it with people on the other end of this, because I think that so many students don't know what to do. And they think that every decision either has a right or a wrong choice. And to paraphrase someone else that we just interviewed, is that there's no such thing as a right or a wrong choice. There's just decisions that you make. You make a decision today, and guess what? If it didn't go well, you make a different decision tomorrow.
Yep.
Which is really weird also, because it was not my intent, but you're in a string of alumni interviews that subconsciously I put you all together, and it was not my intent that you all worked together. Like it was you, Lissa, and Greg.
Yeah. Oh.
And Greg was like a partner with you for at least 1 year on VKey, right?
On VKey,
yeah. So he was our last alumni episode that we just posted, and he's now a nuclear scientist working on fusion and doing great things.
I'm making food. I love it. That's awesome.
But anyways, before we kind of wrap this thing up, I want to give you an opportunity in case there's anything knowing our audience, they're high school students, they're parents of high school students, they're thinking about engineering, they're thinking about colleges. When you reflect on this entire conversation, when you reflect on your experiences, do you have any advice? Do you have any thoughts, things that you want to talk about that you remember, or, stuff to tell them?
Yeah. I mean, my biggest piece of advice for pursuing things in college, if you're listening to this, you're probably interested in engineering. But one of the things that I got the most out of USC, and I think we talked about this, and one of the things that I didn't mention, but definitely drew me to USC was just the breadth of opportunities there and how people there did not see an engineer as just an engineer. And I, like you said, I definitely made use of my time at USC. Like I did a ton of different things. They were kind of all over the map a little bit, but that was appealing to me because I was never going to be somebody who was just an engineer. I studied engineering because I loved math and science, because I wanted to challenge myself, because I wanted to gain problem solving skills, but I also, found a ton of other different outlets. And that's what college is for, right? Like, I mean, plenty of things in college that I discovered were new things to me that I didn't realize I was going to love, but I only did that by putting myself out there and, taking the, the hiking trip before school to meet people. And, there's going to be a million different things that are thrown at you. And, the other piece of advice is don't do everything because you will burn yourself out. And so,
there's a limit.
Pick and choose. And it's also okay to like you said, like dip your toes a little bit into something, realize it's not for you and take a step back. Like it's all about the discovery process. You're going to love it. It was a fun, very fun 4 years. And I wish I could go back, not necessarily to repeat it, but knowing what I know now, but I think we all wish that. Hindsight is 2020, and we're always looking back being like, wow, if I knew what I knew now.
Well, would you do anything different? Would you do anything different?
Not in the broad sense. Maybe, I'd tweak a little bit. We'd always tweak a little bit.
There's that one weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
All right, man. Well, to wrap it up, I do have, we have a little tradition. We have a set of lightning round questions that I ask to everyone. So are you ready for the lightning round questions?
Let's do it.
All right. Ding, ding. Here we go. Texting or talking?
Texting.
Favorite day of the week?
Thursday.
Favorite city in the U.S. besides the one you live in?
Ooh. Nashville?
Whoa. First time for Nashville on the pod. Way to go. Nickname your parents used to call you?
Willie J.
Willie J.
Yeah.
Why didn't I know that? That's amazing. I want to call you Willie J. Last song you either downloaded or you like specifically sought out, in the streaming, like I'm going to go listen to this.
I can't remember it. I'm auditioning for a musical next week. So I've been listening to this song on repeat, but I just forgot the name of it. And it's from the musical Carrie. This is really,
Carrie, like the Stephen King book, Carrie? There's a musical? Yeah. Oh, I don't know anything about this. That's amazing.
It's dark. Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to talk to animals?
Oh, it's got to be every language. That's just unbeatable.
Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
How long does it take you to get ready?
I want to say 20 minutes, but realistically it's like 35. I give myself 20 and I'm late.
I like how you were mentally arguing with yourself before you answered that question. I wish people could see the calculations that were going on.
Well, because I'm like, I tell myself it's 20, but then I'm 15 minutes late. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, got it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good of a driver are you? 10 being best.
Oh, I think I'm an 8, a solid 8.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank. Taylor Swift is
a genius.
A genius. At what age do you want to retire?
Want? How old am I? 32, 36. Wants and realistic are two different things.
Got it. Invisibility or super strength?
Invisibility.
All right. And last of our lightning round questions. Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat animal crackers?
No. Go for it.
Do
they have milk in them? Oh, no, they're not. You didn't say
not vegan. A vegan. Is it
vegetarian?
They definitely don't have.
They definitely don't. Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to
Thank you,
come
Paul.
chat with us and share
Yeah,
your
it was great to
story.
catch up.
It was awesome, man. Thank you. I appreciate it, especially on your journey that you're going through right now and making time for us. So I do appreciate it.
Of course.
All right, man. I'll let you know when this gets out.
Yeah, please do.
All right.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thanks, buddy. Bye.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you, Paul, for bringing us another super awesome person, another great episode. I really liked hearing about Will's combination of engineering and the arts. It's something that I think a lot of students might not talk about, but a lot of people are interested in that. I think I know a lot of engineers who also play the piano, do really cool things. Actually, one of my coworkers, one of the other Viterbi student ambassadors, he has a minor in, is it music production?
Okay, yeah. That's very common for engineers.
Yeah, so it was really cool to hear Will's take with all that and his whole journey. Yeah, what do you think, Paul?
I mean, this is something that is so common, right? Students will, and I think that's what's unfortunate is that it's so common for students to come to me somewhat sheepishly and say, I don't really know what to do because I love theater, but I'm thinking about studying engineering. Or I don't know what to do because I love dance. Or I don't know what to do because I love music, or I love fine art, or whatever it's going to be. And I think that and this is a little bit of what we talked about, but to put a finer point on it, you don't have to choose. The ideas of choosing a degree program, there's a choice there. But that doesn't mean that because you choose an engineering degree that you have automatically forfeited your interests or your passions or the other sides of who you are as a human being. There's a lot of talk in college education. There's a lot of talk in grown circles, in grown-ups circles, I should say, that talk about passions and find your passion and, be the whole person and holistic education. And I think all of those things imply that you are made up of a lot of different ideas and a lot of different perspectives. And no one is saying that you need to choose some sort of concrete pipeline in which you need to go down. And for our students that, feel like they're at a crossroads, it's not. And students will carry on those traditions and those passions. And I think what you heard from Will mostly here is the fact that when he let some of it go, like when he talked a little bit about his professional life and he realized he hadn't done theater in a while and he started doing community theater now, he realized that he's been missing that part of him and that he shouldn't have been denying himself that so much. And so if that's a lesson to anybody out there in high school looking at college, this is a great opportunity to engage further. And USC has all of these programs, and it's not rare for a student to continue to pursue disparate ideas or seemingly disparate ideas of engineering and music or dance or fine arts or whatever it might be. So I think that's the coolest part about this.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing a lot of engineering plus.
Engineering plus. That's it.
Which if you've listened to the podcast before, if you listen in the future, you'll hear us talk about it. But I think for myself and a lot of other people in Viterbi, it's such a big attraction of the school. Everybody has their other thing going on outside of engineering. Like we're people, we're not just engineers. We're not just robots who sit and code all day. As cool as that sounds, we have our different interests. So I really like how Will highlighted his journey with that, and just in general how that's so embraced at Viterbi.
Yeah, I'm reminded of threads. Even in Brenton's episode, we were bringing up other episodes, and in this one, I'm reminded of Lissa's episode again, where she talked about like in her professional world, they wanted to make sure that everybody had a +1, and she always had like a +10 or whatever it was. I forget what she said, but it's still that idea of don't confine yourself to a specific definition, just because that might be what you end up studying or might be what your job title is. There's lots more to yourself than just that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm getting ahead of myself, Paul. There are like some non-episode related things that I have a big update. I don't know why I didn't share this, why I didn't think of it, but I have Taylor. You've probably heard. Like, I know you went to the Taylor Swift concert. You've probably heard me whining about it, but I have Taylor Swift tickets.
What? For where and when?
New Orleans in 2024. So it's funny. I like bought the tickets and my parents were like, oh, cool. And then they're like, we just looked at the dates. It's like the weekend after my 23rd birthday. So I will be 2 whole calendar years older than I am right now, but I will see Taylor Swift.
Wait, so this is like fall of next year?
Yeah. Yeah. So she came out and announced different tour dates. And this time I was like, I am getting it this time. Actually, you'd find this interesting. I mobilized a group of like 18 friends and family members to all register for the pre-sale codes for me. Because I was like, I am getting Taylor Swift tickets. The odds are against me, but I am getting it. So then 4 of them were chosen. And actually all of them who were chosen ended up getting tickets. But my poor boyfriend was sitting in the Ticketmaster queue for a while because I was at work and I was just texting him. I was like, here are the instructions. I sent him like a typed up list. I'm like, this is what you do.
Gosh.
Do not refresh when you're in the queue. It's
my gosh.
But
and this I'm curious just from, I don't know, like logistics sense. And so this is still the Eras tour?
This is still the Eras tour. Yeah, this is the second US leg. And then she also announced actually Canada has a couple of shows in this one.
Okay.
But
and so she will have been on technically on tour with this show for over 2 years.
Yeah. There's some statistic out there. I think this is like one of, if not the, like will be the longest running tour, like of under a specific title.
It's amazing. I remember when she was in LA, there was all those stats that were coming out like on the news and how she makes like $13 million per show.
Yeah. And not only is it like her making the money, but like all the people around her and also like the community's economy. Those are some very, very interesting things. But yeah, so I'm no longer salty. I'm going to see.
Okay. So, well, you will have graduated at that point and you will be working somewhere at that point. And so at that point, we're going to need to have you check back in with us. It'll be the longest running check-in on a themed conversation of Taylor Swift persisting through the Viterbi Voices podcast for over 2 years, because we will have started that conversation in August. I mean, technically, and I got our tickets October of last year.
Yeah.
I mean, like
3 years spanning, like
nuts.
From, she's gotten a lot of good promo on this podcast. I gotta say, like,
I think that we should claim credit for any purchases of Taylor Swift tickets naturally was because of this podcast conversation. I'm sure it had nothing to do with anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah. we should be like paid ambassadors at this point.
I think so. I think there's some sort of there's something that could be thrown our way. I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm sure Taylor's a huge listener of the Viterbi Voices podcast, and I'm sure that she's, you know, listening to it regularly. Doesn't miss an episode. Loves to hear all the alumni conversations of USC Viterbi engineering graduates, just like everyone else in the world. So Taylor, congrats, way to go, and thank you for the great show. And I'm excited that you're going to give another great show to Maya in New Orleans in a year and a half.
Yeah. Pretty much. I'm already excited for it.
When's the date of the show? You said it's fall.
It's October, I believe. So I haven't decided the 26th or the 27th. But regardless, it's like 2 days after my birthday. So I'm like, this is gonna be a good like birthday weekend trip, big time, full-time job. Have
you ever been to New Orleans?
I have not either. No.
That's a whole other conversation we should have. Good luck. Good luck in the best way possible. I love New Orleans. I think
scared.
It's a great city. It's a great city. But yeah, everything you've heard is true.
Oh boy.
It's a cool place.
All right.
And there's lots of really, really good things about it. But it's a good time. I love that.
Well,
city.
Also speaking of traveling, you want to give us a quick where you're going to be for the upcoming little bit?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the day this podcast episode is released, I will be on a plane to Taipei. And so I'm leaving on a extended kind of week and a half trip through Asia. I'll be hitting up Taipei, Hong Kong, Beijing, Shanghai. And so we'll be doing some events out there. And then while I'm gone, we also have other staff going in different directions. And the first of those cities is the Bay Area up in, I think we're going to be in Santa Clara. And Stacy and Lisa from our staff will be running those events up in the Bay Area. And then we've also got Hawaii. Angie will be in Hawaii on Tuesday, September 12th. So the Bay Area is September 10th. September 12th is Hawaii. We've got then the East Coast will come in on the next weekend. Boston, New York, Philly, DC. So that's the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th. Becky, our director of admission, will be out there. We all have a conference that we'll be in Maryland right after that. I'm meeting up with Becky there. Then we've got some of these other cities, Phoenix and Denver on the 30th and on October 1st. Travel continues after that for the week after that. Then there's Portland and Seattle, Dallas and Houston. Stacy will be taking the Pacific Northwest and Lisa will be taking the Texas cities. That will be on October 7th and 8th. I'm running out of breath. And then on the 14th, October 14th and 15th, we have Miami and Atlanta. Miami, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, and that will be Angie who will be there. And then also I will be in Chicago on Sunday, October 15th. All of these events are open to anyone who might be thinking about considering applying for fall 2024. And they can find more about that at viterbi.link/events. So viterbi.link/events. Check that out. Lots of cool stuff there. And of course, if you can't make it, we've got virtual events happening, of which I know, Maya, you know a few of these things as well. And we've got, things to learn about admission. We've got student live chats, student events, student tours. And then we've got on-campus things too. We've got on-campus events going on most, on Mondays and Fridays and a few Wednesdays here and there. And it's just kind of ongoing. So if you go to our viterbi.link/events, website, you'll see all of these different events available for you to register. Spaces are limited at the majority of these. And so if you're going to register for anything, register now. So I've seen trends lately where students are trying to register the night before and maybe it's booked. And so you don't want to do that. If you're going to register for it now. And also only register if you're going to go. Don't take the seat from someone else who might need to go later on. So please be mindful of everyone else in this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like Paul was saying, there's a bunch of virtual stuff coming out. So if you can't make it to an event or don't want to go to any synchronous event, like if your schedule is super weird, there's a bunch of content that different students like myself are putting out through the Viterbi Student Ambassadors. So feel free to check out our Instagram. Our Instagram is @ViterbiStudent. We have Instagram, TikTok. Check out our old podcast episodes. We have a blog going as well. Yeah, lots of good content, different ways for you to get connected.
And one more set of events you all should know about is that we are going to be visiting community colleges in the area as well. So all of our prospective transfer students out there, if you're at any of these colleges, we will see you at your transfer fair. You can come out and stop by and say hello. Glendale College on October 3rd, PCC on October 4th. OCC, Orange Coast College, on October 10th, Santa Monica College on October 12th, De Anza College on October 19th. We hear Foothill might be on the 18th, but we don't know. So that's up in Northern California. Mount Sac we'll see on October 25th. And let's see, November 1st, LA Pierce College up in the Valley, IVC, Irvine Valley College on the November 8th. And we might even add a few others, but stay tuned to our website because we will all post every one of these up there as well. But go to your community college transfer fairs, and we'd love to see you there too.
Mm-hmm. Have our tagline for coming to these events: meet the faces behind the voices.
There we go. We gotta make the invite. We gotta make the mailer.
Okay, awesome. Do you have anything else to leave the listeners with today, Paul?
I think that's it. I think we talked a lot. I just started looking at a calendar and just rattling off dates, just because I think I'm overwhelmed by the amount of stuff we're about to go do. But I'm excited about it as well. And I hope any of you, if you're listening, you're going to come check us out. But that's really it, Maya. Thanks so much.